I have to say I got it. Okay, I just want to say a few words about RAMP for those of you who may not know about it. Most of you probably do. So this was a volunteer project conceived when the pandemic began, March 2020. Seems like a long time ago now. And it started with a call coordinated by myself on behalf of the Royal Society for voluntary assistance with epi-modeling, broadly defined. Also, we had a lot of help from EPCC in Edinburgh in terms of managing volunteer database and elements like that. So the initial conception was to have a period of several months where people could sign up to help. And we were overwhelmed, completely taken aback by the scale of response. We had 1,800 responses, but many of these were from teams of up to 50 people, more in a few cases. So this unsurprisingly created a bit of a headache. Nonetheless, we managed to get our act together to some extent anyway. So the actions that we took in those early days were, the first one was to second some of these volunteers to existing epi-modeling groups who were, as you don't need to be told, stretched absolutely to the limit in the early stages of the pandemic. We also established a set of forums which allowed people to do kind of crowdsourced reviewing of world literature. And that fed into something called the Rapid Review Group, which was set up to firstly filter some of that emerging literature through to SPIAM and SAGE, but also to respond to requests from those bodies for quick turnaround assessments of the quality of pieces of work that were floating in from the rest of the planet, basically. And we helped establish the Infectious Diseases Pandemics program at the Newton Institute. We also convened from among those volunteers and a few others, various task teams, some large, some small. There's a list of the topics here, which I won't go into, and some of those are going to be reflected in talks today. So during that first period, and then things kind of extended on for about another 6 months before the main body of the volunteer effort was sort of wound down, although many of those volunteers now have, of course, embraced epidemic modeling or COVID modeling in particular as part of their ongoing research activities. Nonetheless, our task teams, as distinct from the SPIAM secondees, produced about 50 papers, reports of various kinds, and multiple outputs on which some of these volunteers were authors through participation in the existing modeling groups. And there was quite a bit of work on code bases, assessment of the robustness of code and red team work, as it's called. So the Newton IDP program, which many of you will have been involved with or familiar with, there's an online repository of all the talks and presentations there, and a bunch of papers and discussion documents emerging from that. The Rapid Review Group looked at over 100 specific items at the request of SAGE and SPIAM that come from forums. And the forums produced kind of some sort of opinion on at least 300 other papers. Then the second stage, which covers the period, the last 18 months. So we got this continuity network grant and did various things with it. One was to enhance the staff count at the Royal Society for what they call policy landing work. So that's trying to connect scientific advances with the right bits of government that need to know about it. Of course, that's particularly difficult when the government is changing its structure continuously, which is what was happening. The Rapid Review Group continued, but I think it's fair to say it's become redundant, which is a good sign that after the shock of COVID, the system that exists for peer review and for establishing what is literature that one should be building decisions on and what isn't, has sort of recovered its own internal equilibrium, I would say. We introduced some innovation awards, which are still being spent for various outreach-focused activities from early career people. But the main thing, I think, from this continuity network has been this series of programs coordinated around the Newton Institute, not everything held there, some at ICMS in Edinburgh and other places, with the Newton Gateway team, many of whom are here, running the show. So we had funding for 20 or so meetings, initially virtual, now physical, as you see. I'm particularly glad that we can sort of end this program in a proper series of physical meetings. We had one at the Royal Society last Monday, and there's this one today. So in choosing the topics, we've been trying to respond to the community, particularly Juniper, incredibly helpful, but also other partners, including CVA, which is one of the consortia set up for well, uncertainty quantification and other aspects of code verification, ICMS and the knowledge transfer network. And since several of them in the room, it's gone. Well, so my last slide was exactly like this. It had a big box at the bottom, which has disappeared. In fact, your slides have also disappeared, Julie. That looks bad. Anyway, what I wanted to do finally was to thank the Newton Gateway team for their incredible delivery of this program. This is our 22nd meeting in 18 months. And I think actually that shows that when, for some reason, science has suddenly become turbocharged and everything is evolving at breakneck speed, you need extra meetings. And it's no good asking the scientists who are doing all that stuff to organize those. So it's been incredibly helpful for the Gateway team. So that's Jane, Claire, Maha, and Naomi to really carry most of the heavy lifting in terms of getting these meetings to actually happen. So I'm incredibly grateful for them. Now, what's happened to Julia's slides, I don't know, but we'll find out in just a second. This is actually frozen. Oh, yeah, there we go. So you can do it on this. Oh, well, there you go. That was what I was going to say. And apparently then we can advance slides here, but not with that, which is what I was trying to do. There you go. Okay, over to Julia.
Thanks, and it's really wonderful to see everyone in person. I'm just going to introduce the Juniper Consortium. So we're the Joint Universities Pandemic and Epidemiological Research Consortium. A rough timeline is by May 2020, SPI-M had about 50 active scientists who are participants and members of SPI-M. And some of them came from large institutions, particularly Imperial and London School. But many of us came from smaller research groups, dotted here and there with particular specialist interest or expertise. And quite naturally, over spring and summer 2020, we started joining forces. Lots of us had overlapped, of course, in research groups earlier before, in the decades before. And we formed the Juniper Consortium. We formally started in November 2020 as we were funded by UKRI COVID-19 Emergency Response Grant. There were three key aims of Juniper. One was building a community so we could work together. And that meant we could respond to the emergency much more efficiently. We could use our expertise in different groups appropriately. We'd see the urgent asks coming in and be able to distribute them amongst ourselves, bring in extra expertise, and also just a massive support network under the 2 years of pressure we faced. It's been amazing. The third bullet point is to train the next generation of epimodelers. So it's to create a large consortium so we have the support to bring through and train our PDRAs and other researchers. The middle point and the outward facing, this is where we fit with meetings like this and with working with the Gateway and working with RAMP, is outward facing to the wider research community and general public. Well, facing the wider research community, that's been done through the Newton Gateway and RAMP. It's this three-way connection that's made this work. This is who we are. I co-lead it with Matt Keeling, who's here in person. And we've got Louise Dyson will be talking at this meeting, and also Ian Hall. And Dr. Kira Dangerfield is our program manager. And Kira, you sometimes avoid being on the photos, but I found you on this photo. So you've got the 16 co-Is, and Kira, that is you, isn't it, under the blue arrow? Yes, so I finally found you in a photo. This is us meeting together for the first time in person in March. And in-person meetings, all the stuff around the edges really matters. So I'm looking forward to that over today and tomorrow. Science communication to the wider public, we've done through Plus. Yes, we've got Marianne here in person, and Rachel Thomas is not here in person, and they're the editors of Plus magazine. This has meant we've had in-house science writing and able to communicate very directly from the research to straight through to public-facing articles. 36 articles and 6 podcasts. That's huge, and that's an impact as well. For example, the weekly R number thing that went out from the government, I think on Fridays for a long time, the link to explaining what growth rate is was to a PLUS article. Juniper, over the 18 months, produced over 80 peer-reviewed papers. But I think that's only really the tip of the iceberg, because a lot of what we did, we didn't stop to try and write up or didn't submit for peer review publication yet. Well over 100 papers went to SPI-M from Juniper in those 18 months, and lots of those papers contributed to consensus statements that went into SAGE every week, but 20 papers at least from Juniper went directly to SAGE and were presented there. Kind of work that Juniper has done has been around educational settings, schools and universities, impacts of different vaccination strategies. I think we're going to hear something of the roadmap modelling from Matt, and particularly looking at new variants as a place where Juniper has been able to respond very quickly on the emergence of Delta and Omicron, and generally supporting the wider work of SPI-M. You can follow us on Twitter or our website, or talk to us. All right, so I've just got one slide to set the context with very high quality artwork that I know you've all come to love from me. So you can't see at the top. So what should we learn? You can't see it at all from this. What are we going to learn from what we've experienced in the last 2 years, which may be useful to help with future pandemics? And that's what I really want to encourage you to have the mindset of today. I think a lot of the talks are going to be focused on the research that's been done and what we've learned from COVID-19. In questions and discussions, let's try and distill from that. What should be the takeaways? What helps us with resilience against future pandemics? And we've got this slide up just to also open your mind to the range of what we're going to be thinking about. A lot of the meetings we've had have been focused on very specific things, for example, on the testing a couple of weeks ago. This one, we're going to cut across almost everywhere where mathematical modelling has been involved with COVID. Excuse me. It's a problem with in person, you can't mute to subtly cough, can you? Sorry. So we're going to start off, actually, the first 2 talks are swapped. So we'll go to aerosols and ventilations. I've tried to depict that in the corner there, but it looks more like The Exorcist than ventilation. I'm sorry about that. And urban analytics will be thinking about cities, towns, human mobility, which I've tried to draw as arrows of moving between towns. And of course, models, data and policy. I've tried to illustrate the data and models with a graph. The top right is how it turns into policy. So that's this afternoon, or that's this morning, sorry, before lunch. Then this afternoon, we move on to zoonoses. That's a bat. I'm quite happy with the bat, actually. Decision-making, thinking particularly about the early days of emergence of something new, uncertain data, uncertain picture, and how you do something with that. The perennial problem of estimating R, that's important in the early days, but important throughout. And vulnerable settings. Ian, I don't even know how to draw a care home, so just imagine one of those as a care home. This afternoon looks like all the components you need for a really good movie on pandemics, really. It's starting to think about early days of something else. And then tomorrow morning, we move on to thinking about vaccines and evolution problems. So it's a iffy looking phylogenetic tree. How we incorporate behaviour into epidemic models. And this has been a real theme that's emerged this pandemic. I've tried to depict that with the bubbles there. Then Tom, I think you're going to go the whole way through from within host epi and genomics. We're going to think about urban resilience. I'm looking forward to hear what cities post-pandemics it's like. And finally, Louise will bring us back to thinking about how we've got from the science to the policy, that communication route. Mike, do you want to add anything? No? So we've got broad ranging in terms of themes, but the central idea to focus on is bringing this together for what we learn for resilience for future pandemics. And I'll hand back to Kirsty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just thanks.